We'll call this meeting of the Clackamas County Commission to order and ask for the roll call. Please, Mr. Wheeler.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Damon,
Here.
Commissioner Bernard,
Here.
Commissioner Savas,
Here.
Commissioner Leininger,
Here.
and Chair Lehan.
Here. And if you would, please, rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would entertain a motion to approve the order of agenda.
Chair Lehan, I move we approve the order of the agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Damon and seconded by Commissioner Leininger that we approve the order of agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0, which is unanimous. And the first item we have on that agenda is a presentation proclaiming April 2012 as Grange Month in Clackamas County. I believe we have Tim Hyder here from Public and Government Affairs to discuss this proclamation.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tim Hyder from Public and Government Affairs, and I am here to talk about the many good programs offered by our local Granges and also to inform the Board that the month of April also commemorates National County Government Month. And the purpose is to raise public awareness and understanding of the many roles and responsibilities county governments play. Each week during the month of April, county staff will offer a presentation about a program or service that benefits the people of Clackamas County. And today we honor the many contributions made by our local Granges, involving hundreds of local residents dedicated to agriculture production and citizen involvement in our community. And we ask the Board to declare April 2012 Grange Month in Clackamas County. The Grange is a fraternal organization dating back to 1876. It serves as a united voice in helping to enhance the quality of life, especially for those living in rural communities, working in agriculture, food, and fiber production. There are 17 active Granges in Clackamas County, which offer memberships to men and women as well as to juniors, youth, and goals with the idea of igniting a lifetime passion for public service and government involvement. The organization has a proud history of civic participation, including the promotion of such milestone issues as rural mail delivery, women's rights, and providing assistance to people in need. Today we have with us Mike Province. He's a member of the Redland Grange, and there are other Grange members in the community, and Mike would like to say a few words about the benefits of Granges.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Would you
Although I am,
just introduce yourself for the
yes, my name is Mike
cameras.
Province. I am the master of the Redland Grange, And although I do represent just the Redland Grange, I also would like to let everyone know that we, as Tim was saying, we do have 17 active granges within Clackamas County. And they perform a lot of good work. They do a lot of good things for people. They bring in youngsters who can join the Grange at the age of 14 years old and be full members. And it helps them to learn and understand about government, how the government works, how they can be good citizens. And we're going to have an open house at the Redland Grange on April 15th from 1 to 4 p.m. So if anyone would like to show up, we would be glad to have you there. We will cram you full of cookies and coffee. And thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I did misspoke. It's 1867, actually, so it's even older legacy. Do you have any questions for
Any
me?
questions about this proclamation before? I presume you have the
do.
proclamation there to read
Yes.
for us, or,
Then, with your permission, I'd like to read the proclamation, if I may.
yes, do indeed.
Since 1867, the Grange has been a grassroots movement for the benefit of American families and local communities. And whereas Grange programs are family-oriented, beginning with Junior Grange for children of ages 14 through 13, for the purpose of getting children involved with their community, with agriculture, and with good citizenship. And whereas Grange activities support personal development, leadership seminars, and foster a wide range of useful skills and abilities for personal growth through social, cultural, and educational programs. And whereas Grange members attend public meetings, inform themselves of local, state, and national issues, and speak on behalf of those working in agriculture, producing food, fuel, fiber. And whereas members of 17 active Granges in Clackamas County ignite a passion in the community for service and involvement. Now, therefore, the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim April 2012 as Grange Month in Clackamas County. We urge the citizens of the county to recognize and participate in Grange activities and support Clackamas County Granges, dated this 5th day of April 2012, Clackamas County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adopt this or proclaim this, adopt this proclamation proclaiming this.
Madam Chair, I move we proclaim April 2012 as Grange Month in Clackamas County, and to clarify, it says age 4 through 13 in the actual proclamation.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Savas that we proclaim April 2012 as Grange Month in Clackamas County. Is there any discussion?
I actually have something. So I grew up in Jackson County in Southern Oregon, and my family was part of the Grange in Ashland. And I don't know if it was because of the family sand and gravel business, construction business or something. Somehow we were there. But I remember going to the Grange all the time, and it was an important, useful location in the community back then in Ashland, when Ashland was different than it is now. And it also had this wonderful feature, which was you could pump your own gas, which was extremely fun for me at the time. And so I have fond personal memories of Granges, and they're clearly a really important part of our community here in Clackamas County, where we have strong rural communities and a lot of agricultural families. And so thank you for keeping this great tradition alive, and for your leadership on this, and for being here with us today.
I just want to acknowledge, I think the key word here is community. And being out in the rural areas, I know there needs to be a place, and that's what the Grange serves. It serves as a place for the community to get together and to help one another and communicate and so forth. So I'm really appreciative that these are still maintained and there's still love for the Grange, and that there's, again, so much, love and cooperation within those communities. Thank you.
I just want to say also thank you. As a resident of Eagle Creek, I know the Eagle Creek Grange provides an important gathering place for our community, and a really fine ham dinner. And so, but I do know that membership is down with Granges, and anything that we can do to increase membership, particularly among our youth, about the importance of the Grange as an institution in our rural communities, anything that we can do as a county to help with that, please let us know.
And
everyone has something to say about
We
Granges.
like Granges.
I've had an opportunity to serve pancake breakfasts at Granges, been to candidates forums, and the Milwaukee Grange many times. It was a useful place for the community to get together, especially the neighborhood associations. And I know it's very hard to maintain those buildings and to keep membership up, but we appreciate all you do and the support for the community, the opportunity for the community to get together. Some places, some of the Granges actually have theater, plays. The one out in Wilsonville, I've been to a few plays that the chair actually was in. So, so it's a great forum for the community. So thank you very much.
So I don't want to be left out here. I'm quite certain the oldest person sitting up here, and seventh generation Clackamas County resident. I know that many of my ancestors in that 7 lines were deeply involved in the Grange, and I've been involved a lot in community history. So I know that at the time that the Grange movement occurred throughout the West, it was a time of 1- and 2-room schoolhouses, and most communities, even more urban communities, but certainly in the rural, urban like Wilsonville was at the time, but they didn't have a gathering place. So the Grange Hall was the center of community for rural communities and even those that were in the beginning of starting to be small towns. The Grange Hall, because there was not a school or a gymnasium or something to go to for an assembly, a community assembly, it served an extremely important role. And one of those was in civics, the general civics, and what I always am amazed at, the role of elocution contests that they had, and where people would come at all ages, from little children to seniors, to give speeches or recite poetry or otherwise do elocution and compete with each other. In these very simple farm towns, they were reciting great poetry, so I always thought it was an amazing thing. And through the years, the Grange has changed and become more updated, and but it continues to serve that basic role of being a gathering place for communities, and very important, especially to farming communities. So I'm happy to support this. And with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Passes unanimously 5-0. And then we were going to have a photo, I guess. I don't know who all might be here for the Grange issue, but surely
Great.
whoever is will all wander down.
Yeah, right up here.
It's the good spot.
It's perfect. Actually, it really is. But we'll put a little pair of feet on the ground.
Yes, exactly. I just kept forgetting to ask.
No, it's fine.
I hope it's not. The next item is the Housing Authority Consent Agenda. For this item, we will be sitting as the Housing Authority Board. And I will note that Erica Allison, who usually joins us for this, is not able to be here today. But I will, I guess, ask the clerk to read the Housing Authority Consent Agenda by title.
Sure. There's one item. It's a resolution number 1888, final approval of the Housing Authority of Clackamas County's fiscal year 2012 annual plan.
Commissioner Bernard.
Madam Chair, I would like to remove from this consent agenda item 19 in the plan, which is a process to study the voucher program, moving it out to Home Forward. I have a couple concerns. I've had an opportunity to speak to some of the people who do the hard work to supply this service to those in need. It's important to note, and I did send you all an email just with some facts, that 22.51% of the folks that we serve are elderly, 45% are disabled. We are now building health clinics and supporting school-based health clinics to make these services more accessible to those in need. And so moving voucher programs to Home Forward, which is based in Portland, would provide less service and less accessibility. HACC has adapted service to participants with special needs, and Home Forward will not be aware of the needs of those families. I mean, we have people who've worked here over 30 years in this department who know these folks. They also, our department annually reviews each participant and determines whether they are still qualified for the program. Home Forward does that every 3 years. And I think it's important that the taxpayers of Clackamas County know that we're actually looking at these programs and making sure that the people who are receiving these services actually do deserve it. We also have numerous facilities in Clackamas County that rent apartments to these to participants in these programs, often called Section 8, which again is 22.51% elderly and 45% disabled. This program has been very valuable. In Clackamas County, when it started, we had about 200 vouchers in 1974. That has climbed to 1,600, and we still have 4,000 people on a waiting list trying to get into this program, and that need continues to grow. I think it's important that this not become a Portland-centric organization, and we've had many, many people come and talk about how important it is that Clackamas County determines whether these services are services that we should provide to the folks who live in Clackamas County. And putting them into another county just does not work for me. And I don't think it would work for the citizens of Clackamas County. Not being able to use a local project fund to subsidize, one of the biggest issues is that there's a shortfall in this due to federal funds and state funds being cut. But we've actually started a new program in Clackamas County. It's called the Clackamas County Leadership Academy. And at a meeting I was at the other day, the real goal of the LEAN program is to talk to the folks who actually work in this program and find out how we might be able to save money. And that starts at the bottom, not at the top. Dwight Eisenhower said, "Pull the string and it will follow you wherever you wish. Push it and it will go nowhere at all." So it's important, I think, that we commit our leadership to a critical thing, and that is to make sure that the employees feel empowered to act on their process improvement ideas, and that we're going to act on their process improvement ideas. So I would rather that this item 19 be pulled from the plan and evaluated outside of the plan, and make sure that the folks who do the hard work really have a part in making those decisions. And should, it be determined that moving it to Portland is the best thing, I would still have a problem with that, but yeah, I feel that the folks working there want to provide the best service to the citizens of Clackamas County, and they're willing to do that. And if that's what the decision is, then we'll have to rethink this. But for now, I think pulling it from the plan will make those folks feel easier and will empower them to actually find a way to cut, spending and make this program more viable under the, in this tough economy. So I would like to move. So I'll make the motion. We can have further discussion. I got to find it in my paperwork. I would like to move that we approve the Housing Authority plan with one amendment, that we remove item 19 outside of the plan for further study in another form.
Madam Chair, is this the same agenda 9, or item 19 that we talked about 2 weeks ago? So as I understood it is that approving the plan does not change anything, that it is actually to be studied, and by having it in the plan, that there is an opportunity to actually have it studied, that this doesn't change anything? And it was also my understanding that when we discussed this 2 weeks ago, that you voted for to have its inclusion. Is that?
No. I voted to move this discussion forward to another date. And having it in the plan or outside of the plan does make a difference. Because I think at this point in the plan, it looks for outside participation to review whether we should move this plan outside, or whether we can, if we pull it from the plan, it basically says, let's work within work with the folks who actually provide this service and those providers to try and figure out a way to save some money and make this program more viable. So I think it does make a difference whether it's in the plan or not. And I think it does, so that's why I suggest we pull it.
Well, I didn't understand that it precluded that from happening. Actually, I thought it opened the door to allow it to happen.
Well, let's back up a second here and see if we have a second, and then we'll have fuller discussion.
I'll second the motion.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Damon that we approve the Housing Authority consent agenda without number 19, and instead move that outside the plan. I know that Terrell is here. Did you have anything to illuminate on this before we have further?
A couple points. One is that we do have the staff engaged in a work group already, because we are looking at a number of different options that the staff work group helped us identify. And that was the first step. Also, that staff work group helped us identify a number of criteria, if you will, lenses that we will evaluate, not only researching and considering a consortium, but also the other possible changes on the list. So the staff is engaged. They volunteered to be on the committee, and will continue to involve the staff who want to be involved throughout the evaluation process, not only of this piece, but of the other pieces on that list as well. In terms of approving the plan, I think we need a plan approved today so that we can submit it to HUD by the 17th. Taking it out of the plan does by no means mean we can't still look at it. Again, as I said last time, the plan is more of an indication of our intent, and we're very careful about the language we use in the different items. This piece is very much, as it's worded, research and consider. It doesn't say implement. Again, no decisions have been made, and not only the staff, but other constituencies would be included in decision-making, and of course, any decision has to come before you for approval. I think in terms of consortium, there's been a lot of misconception about what a consortium is and isn't. I'm hearing language about we're turning the program over to Home Forward. That's not a consortium model. A consortium model is two agencies come together in partnership and figure out the role for each of the agencies and how to deliver the programs effectively together in their areas. And so I wanted to make that note as well.
Other, Commissioner Leininger.
Mr. Anderson, could you read for me the language of item 19, please?
Item 19 says, HACC will research and consider a consortium of our Housing Choice Voucher Program.
So the issue is whether in the face of decreased money from HUD, from the federal government, to administer a really important program that helps low-income people have access to decent housing, whether in the face of those decreasing administrative resources, should we research and consider the idea of whether to team up with another public agency, the Portland Housing Authority, to more efficiently and inexpensively run this program. As I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there wouldn't be fewer Clackamas County residents getting vouchers. The issue on the table, which may not even be a good idea, but you wouldn't know until you really research it, is whether to team up in how we administer the program. Is that your understanding?
Right, that's my understanding, and I believe that as we get into more discussion and research, I mean, first of all, again, a consortium model is wide-ranging, and we're in full control of how that model comes together, right?
So-
I mean, with your input, with staff input, as we talk to Home Forward, what elements would be important for us to have to actually get into the model together? Secondly, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
I know we have a lot of people here for a lot of things, so I won't belabor this, but I think that at this moment in the life of government, we need to be thinking about ways that we can streamline and cut costs so that we can have as much direct service to the community, be it business permitting service or service for survivors of domestic violence or great code enforcement services, whatever the direct services, and minimize the money that we spend on administrative and overhead costs. That's a principle that I believe in strongly. And I think that here, the question is not should we outsource to a private agency public sector jobs. It's actually should two public agencies team up to do this work together. So it's somewhat different than some concerns that people often raise. I do believe that this is important, and it may not even be a good idea, but I think it's our job to the public at this time in the life of our community to look at ways we can save money so we can keep delivering great services to the community. And I have taken to heart Commissioner Bernard's concerns because I think he's a thoughtful person who cares a lot about the staff and how we do our work in Clackamas County. And after hearing from Stacy Chamberlain, who is in the leadership of AFSCME, one of the public employee unions, and I understand that both of them would not prefer that we keep this item in. I heard some input that I think might help address some of these concerns, and that is if we had some represented employees, so some of the union employees who would be affected by a decision to join forces with that group, be part of the evaluation of whether it's a good idea. So perhaps that's already in place. I'm not sure, Trell, but my feeling would be I do think we should look at this. I think we've got to look at this at a time like this. And so I don't support moving item 19, but I would absolutely support trying to accommodate the concerns of staff by making sure that not just non-union, but some union staff are part of the evaluation of whether it's a good idea. And maybe it's not, but far be it for us to not even ask the question.
I would have to agree with Commissioner Leininger on this one. And I just want to just allay people's fear of a consortium. I'm just going to give you an example of a consortium that I was involved with. In 2000, 2001, I became aware of the Regional Water Providers Consortium. And in the Portland metro area, there's 26 water purveyors that provide water service to customers in this region. And we were realizing that we have limited water, and we want to keep the quality and the amount of water sound, and we didn't want to have that risk. So we had to, by mandate, basically, provide a communication program to conserve water. And you probably heard the commercials, maybe over time, about conserving water. Well, 26 water purveyors could have done 26 individual different programs and done it 26 different ways and spent a lot of money that would have been very expensive. But what we did is we all joined together voluntarily and created one program, and we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we were able to provide that service and that level of communication region-wide, and it saved a lot of money. And if anyone wanted to pull out at any time, they could. But we have an opportunity here and a responsibility to frankly research. And if we can actually serve more people in need and create more vouchers by saving money, I think we have a responsibility to do that. And what better not to have the employees, the union, people that know this issue better than anyone else, to have them research it together, I think is valuable. So I would support including it and let it remain in the program.
Right. Can I weigh in on this?
Sure.
So when we had this discussion about this item the last time, and I had supported keeping it in because I agree with what Commissioner Savas and Commissioner Leiniger say about the need to research and look at cost-saving opportunities. But given the email traffic, given the amount of interest and concern in this, I have to wonder if there's something else about how this even appeared in the plan that is tainting the overall plan, and that if we just will remove it and discuss how we bring it forward into the plan, that perhaps we can amend the plan at a future date. I feel like there's something else happening here that's causing this considerable anxiety about even it appearing in the plan. So I support the research into the consortium, and I just think that if we were to remove it, it would give us all some more time to talk about how we even posit it in the plan and then to amend it forward. Because I would hate for this whole plan to not go forward because we're getting hung up on this one item. So I've been talking to people and hearing from folks as well, and I guess I would suggest that we remove it from the plan to take the heat away, to come together to figure out how to reposit it back in the plan, have those conversations, amend it if we're going to move forward, and do that. So that's what I would suggest.
Well, I'm not suggesting anything otherwise. I think we have some good people working there that are willing to participate in the discussion. But a lot of the answers I'm concerned about. One of those is, will there be an office in Clackamas County? And the answer was there should be. But there's no guarantee that there will be. And if we're talking about senior citizens who many, as you get older, give up their driver's license, or disabled people, or mentally or physically disabled, if this moves out of Clackamas County, it makes it more difficult for them to, get the service they need. So, and we're looking at doing something that I've heard many of these citizens talk about, and that is we're considering moving to a nonprofit, which used to be Portland Housing, that's called Home Forward, and it concerns me that many of the folks who have participated in this program in Clackamas County may not have that same accessibility. The other thing is that once it moves to another organization, it's pretty much out of our hands, out of our control. And these good people who have been administering this for years, understand Clackamas County. And I don't suggest that we don't study it. I just suggest that we pull it out of the plan so that some of those people feel more comfortable and would be more willing to participate in trying to figure out how to save money. That's all I'm suggesting.
Okay. Well, I don't think there's a person up here who doesn't believe that what we should do is provide the best service at the lowest cost. That is everybody's goal. I'm not clear myself why there is so much angst over having this item in the plan versus studying it outside of the plan, but there is, and it's not just amongst employees; it's amongst the other people we heard from, the landlords and the clients. And so I'm kind of thinking about it now more like Commissioner Damon, that whatever, whether the angst is founded or not founded, if removing it even temporarily so that we can get better sidebars as to how the study is to proceed, and then decide if we want to study it outside or amend the plan and put it in with these sidebars, these conditions, that maybe that is worth reducing the level of angst that we're hearing in order to move it forward, and at the same time not delay the rest of the plan. But yeah.
Mr. Anderson, can you remind me the rough amount of money you think might be available to be saved if we were to conclude that this is a good idea, and if we were to streamline our administrative process by joining up with another public agency, because the Housing Authority of Portland, now called Home Forward, is not a nonprofit, it's a public agency?
It would be a range of savings. Again, we haven't done the financial analysis on it yet. That's part of the research we would do. But I imagine we would find savings anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. Right now, we're projecting a $225,000 gap in our budget in 5 years for this program. I mean, given congressional allocations. Now, remember that this program and the funding for this program comes from congressional allocations each year, and like many other programs you're familiar with, we really don't have any idea of where that goes from year to year. So the savings, I would offer that range. Financial feasibility analysis would be on the top of the list of what we would do next to see if it's viable financially. It seems that that's our very first step.
So, I know there's anxiety, and without having direct knowledge, I could imagine some of the anxiety comes from staff people who are worried that in a streamlining process, they might not continue to have jobs. And that's a legitimate concern, and I don't belittle that at all. But I do think that at this time in the life of government, we need to be willing to look at being as efficient as we can so that we can deliver as much direct service to people who are in need as we can. I'm personally looking hard for ways to find efficiencies so we can fund things to help really fragile people, as I know everyone on this board is, actually. So I know that there are people who have legitimate concerns about whether their jobs would be in jeopardy. And I also think there are legitimate concerns about whether Home Forward would do as good a job as the good workers of the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. And I just want to reiterate, it might be that they wouldn't. But the only way we'll know is if we ask the question, and I feel like it's disingenuous to say we're not going to ask the question on one piece of paper to make people feel better, but plan completely to ask the question not on that piece of paper. I mean, I feel like the way we have trust with our community and the way we have trust with our staff is to be really clear about what we're doing. And I think everyone on this board is really well-intentioned, and I respect that very much. But I think that it's more clear what we're trying to do if we just stand up and say, you know what, I'm sorry you're worried about whether your job is going to be safe. And I know you're worried about quality, and so am I. And I need to study this because I owe it to the people of Clackamas County to find savings where we can. So that's where I am.
Terrell, could you give me an idea of what the committee and the people who made the decision and worked on this plan, could you give me an idea of the numbers and the makeup of that group?
Well, sure, it starts with staff. We put together the annual plan, we vetted it, management team, then we take it to what's called the Resident Advisory Board. Resident Advisory Board is made up of a number of public housing residents and Section 8 program participants. We vet it with them, and then from there, it goes to public review and public comment. This item in particular, and another item about opening public housing wait lists were inadvertently left off of the initial draft in the initial discussion with the Resident Advisory Committee. Subsequently, we sent a letter to all of the Resident Advisory Committees identifying and detailing this line item, item 19, as well as the other item about opening public housing wait lists. offered an opportunity for comments and check-in, questions, opportunities. Through that process, we received no additional comment or communication around it.
And let me first ask him, so, but my other question is, so if we were to remove this from the plan, this item 19 from the plan, go forward so we could meet the 17th deadline, and then we developed some sidebars, for want of a better word, or clearer criteria for moving forward with item 19, with the study of it, and then we decided in a month or two or whatever to amend the plan and include that back in. Is there a process to do that?
Absolutely. Once a plan is approved, we can amend the annual plan at any time. It's a process of public notice and hearing of 30 to 45 days. So that's the process to amend the plan. There's no urgency in this case because we're researching
Yeah.
and studying.
So the item could be removed as well. It could be included today and removed, amended and then removed.
At another time, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it just makes sense then to remove it. One of the things that Charles just mentioned is that a group got together and looked at the plan, but this was inadvertently left off. And then they all received letters and waiting for comment, but they haven't gotten back together again, giving them the opportunity to actually talk about that item. And so that concerns me. And that doesn't mean that whenever their next meeting is, that, some of those sidebars could be put on there and we could put it back in the plan. So it doesn't make any sense that if we were to vote now, it appears it's 3-2, so that vote would be no, not to move this forward. I mean, would be yes to move this forward without 19, and 2 people would have to vote no, do not move this forward. So it just makes sense to me that the board would be up here and they would vote unanimously to move this forward and consider item 19 at a future date. Makes perfect sense to me. It's kind of like the budget with the sheriff's department. When we vote no on the budget because, or one person votes no on the budget because there's concern about one item, it appears that we don't support the sheriff. That doesn't make sense today. And I do support the plan. I do support studying this. I just think there needs to be some sidebars on it. And since that group, one of the biggest mistakes we made when we got here, and I'm sorry I don't know the program's name. When we got here, there was a decision to give away one of our programs to the state. It had to do with senior citizens. We did not go to the group and talk about this, and the group was very upset that we didn't do this. And this item was not talked about in this group. So it just makes sense to leave this item off and discuss it with that group and with the people who do the hard work. And, if the decision is to put it back in the plan, then that makes perfect sense to me. But I don't want to be in the same position we were with that program and find out about all these things we didn't talk about that all those people brought to our attention after it was already too late.
So I agree. It does feel like there is a process misstep here, and that what we're trying to do is create some space to allow that process to occur and to allow people who have concerns to help frame this issue to bring it back into the plan, if it is going to be back into the plan. So it is, we're looking for cost savings, we're looking for job security, we're looking for quality control, all of those things. We want to research these options, but there does seem like there's this process misstep, and that we need to allow some space for that to happen. And so I agree with what you were saying. And just the fact that we continue to hear about this item tells me that there is some dialogue that needs to occur. There is some discussion. There's some framing that has to happen that hasn't occurred about being able to put this back in. And I don't know that that's disingenuous. I think it's just being responsive to the folks that we've been hearing, to give them that little bit of space to be able to frame it up so that people know with more certainty what it is that we're exploring as we move forward.
So in light of that information, I'm reconsidering. However, I would like to hear a commitment to, outside the program, if it is removed and the vote's successful to remove it, that there's a commitment within a certain time frame. Is there a commitment that you feel comfortable with, commissioners, that this could be revisited and maybe put back into the plan? And
Yes.
Yeah.
is there a commitment on the time frame, or an understanding, or a comfort level on the time frame to do that in?
Well, I don't know that I specifically have that, but I mean, in the next 6 months, I'd be comfortable.
Well-
And it might be more, I mean,
Let's ask Mr. Anderson.
what do you think?
You know, if we were to remove this and allow for some space for this to get reframed and potentially brought back, what might that process look like?
Thank you. Like I said, the first step would be to have Home Forward perform a financial feasibility analysis. We would also be engaged in that at the staff level, looking at the assumptions that were built into a financial analysis. The staff would be engaged in, again, rolling out, what are those assumptions? In fact, they've already helped us frame some of those assumptions. For example, Commissioner, the only reason we say a local office should be is because we haven't run the financial feasibility and we haven't started negotiating a consortium agreement. A consortium agreement would be where all of these, as you say, sidebars would be vetted and documented and codified. So financial feasibility would be our first step, of course, engaging with staff. Another step, obviously, is to check with not only the Resident Advisory Committee, but convene other discussions with current voucher holders who don't serve on that committee as well.
I'd be happy to serve in that capacity.
Just to clarify, when I was saying sidebars, I wasn't meaning on the consortium, because that would be a long process to figure out, but, and very detailed. I was thinking sidebars in terms of how it's evaluated, the criteria under which it's evaluated, and who the participants are in that process. That sort of framework, which I think is a much simpler and faster process, so that one could develop that and move forward to make a decision on whether now is it better to amend the plan and put this in as a study item, or continue to look at it outside of that. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. Not that we would do the whole thing outside the plan, but that we would put sidebars on and have some of these conversations with people who have great anxiety about it, and so that we're more all on board going forward. Because I think everybody, what I'm hearing from everyone up here is that everyone would like to look at it, would like to find out if it's indeed has many benefits or is a cascade of horribles. I don't know. But I'm certainly interested in finding out. That the angst is about what we're hearing, that is more of a process issue. And I think, to respond to Commissioner Savas, that we could do that in a relatively short period of time, in the 2 to 3 month range rather than 6 to 12. Because we're not going to do the whole study. We're going to develop the sidebars for the study.
My other concern is that we're about to go through a huge process with CCOs. I mean, that is going to be very time consuming, very expensive, and this little issue will be a small portion of that overall discussion. And it may not get the desired attention it should have because of this overarching CCO discussion. And I'd say right now it probably hasn't. And so that's why I just think it should be outside the plan and work with folks to find out what's the best move, what we should do next.
Well, I appreciate the fact we're actually discussing this and deliberating, and that's what good government is, and I think that's fantastic. I appreciate Chair Lehan's suggestion that it be a limited time frame of maybe 60 to 90 days, and that'd be great. However, I think as far as sidebars, I think it should be inclusive. I don't think it should be exclusive. So I would rather see a similar open process and in a narrow time frame. And if there's going to be sidebars, limitations on that, I'm probably right back to where I started earlier. So,
May I clarify?
Yeah.
So in terms of the next 60, 90, 120 days, what you're suggesting is that a plan be developed of how we'll proceed in the evaluation and in the vetting process.
Right.
And that I work with you to create that plan. And once that plan is established, then we can begin the evaluation process.
Yeah, a list of who the stakeholder groups are that we need to take into consideration, who are impacted by this decision, and a list of potential impacts and that we want to look at as we go forward, kind of basic criteria for what we want in terms of quality.
Yes.
Those kinds of things, and then if once we have that and it still looks like those are attainable, then perhaps that's when we look at it and say, yes, this is reasonable now to put in the plan. We've done the process piece enough to reduce the anxiety level and put it in the plan at that point to do the full evaluation.
Well, yeah. I think 60 or 90 is a little short, but because a lot of these folks have, who might be involved, actually have jobs, and the staff is very busy. So, I mean, I would commit to, 120 days, having this discussion moving forward with, I mean, I could see 3 meetings with some of the participants and the staff, and it's going to take a little while. I don't want to do a shoddy job and throw it back on there and find out, oops, we missed something either. So, 120 days is one that I'd be willing to support. So, Madam Chair, I call for the question.
Well, I'm just going to ask now of the mover and the seconder that maybe we can go forward like this, but perhaps it would be better to move to remove 19 as a motion and then move to approve the remainder of the plan in 2 different motions.
Well,
That makes sense.
that would be fine. So I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Retract the motion first.
Withdraw your
Oh,
other
so I will withdraw my motion. You withdraw your second.
And I withdraw my second.
And I move to approve. Actually, didn't I already do that?
No,
I
but-
did
but
move.
First move to withdraw 19.
Okay. So since this isn't actually in the consent agenda packet, and it has to do with the voucher program, which is HACC, right? I move that we remove item 19 from the plan for further discussion, and I'd like to set a time certain, 120 days out for consideration and putting it back in the plan, I guess, if that satisfies some of the other folks.
And I second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bernard, seconded by Commissioner Damon, that we remove the item 19 from the plan with a intent to move forward, to relook at it in 120 days at putting it back in the plan. And is there any discussion on that motion?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I don't think it's appropriate to spend 120 days to study it, to include it, and then study it once again. So I just think it's a waste of resources. I think it's a waste of time, and I think that the real process of vetting it could be done, and we could actually make a motion, frankly, to make sure that the process is vetted once, and there's no redundancy, there's no waste of time, and we can get towards saving money. So I'm going to vote against it.
I have a comment too. I think this is about being clear and transparent with the community and with our employees about what we're doing, and having the guts to make unpopular choices, or at least research making unpopular choices, so that we can make the highest and best use of community dollars. And I think we need to study it. I think we need to study it sooner rather than later, and I think we need to be clear with the community that that's what we need to do. So.
Yes.
I think that by allowing some space for people to get together to talk about how to frame this as a part of the plan could allow potentially other opportunities for cost savings and research to appear in the plan in addition to this one. And so I don't think that by allowing some space, it limits our ability to research a potential consortium. I think it provides some space for people who clearly have concerns and have ideas to talk about how to frame this up, what are the best ways to move forward, what are the things that we need to research, and put those things in the plan. So that's why I'm supporting it.
And I would certainly, I will support the motion, but I would certainly hope that we would be able to complete that, make that
Sure.
decision before the 120 days. So the 120 days is the outside marker on that. So with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
Yeah, you can say, no, I didn't say what to say.
Madam Chair?
Passes 3-2.
I move we approve the Housing Authority consent agenda as amended.
Second on that.
And I second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Damon that we approve the Housing Authority consent agenda as amended so that this can move forward. Discussion on this item.
As I recall, the rest of the Housing Authority consent agenda, or the rest of this plan, identifies a whole bunch of other questions and issues we should study to see if there are ways that we can save money. And so, although I would have loved to have had 19 in it, I absolutely think we need to study all the other things. We need to study as much as we can, as soon as possible, to save money so that we can serve more people. So I'll be supporting it.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. If I may, to reflect that, Commissioner Leininger, items number 2, 3, 4, 9, 12, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 17 are all items to research and consider and find cost savings measures.
Right. Okay, then all those in favor of moving forward with the remainder of the plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one? Then that passes 5-0. Okay. Well, that was the longest Housing Authority consent agenda I've ever seen. Brings us right on to a public hearing on ZDO, on proposed ZDO amendment. And we have Jennifer Hughes from the Planning Division and Rhett Tatum from County Council here to update us on this one.
There's enough concern for all those folks.
I don't know what the issues are, but that's why we have to come together just to create that space.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we did the right thing.
Yes.
So we're here today on a continued hearing. As you'll recall, at last week's hearing, you considered ZDO 235, which is a package of legislative text amendments to the zoning and development ordinance. The two primary amendments create Section 105, which sort of puts in our code, our planning commission. We've had one for a while. It's just never been codified. And then there's 106, which streamlines and standardizes similar use provisions. Or similar use provisions are provisions in our commercial and industrial zones that allow an applicant to come and say, my use isn't listed as a primary use, but it's like another use in this zone, and then there's a planning director interpretation. That it had existed in many of our commercial and industrial zones, not in some, and where it existed, there were different processes. So the idea was to have one process and use it in all the zones, and really it was to expand opportunities for applicants to have a use allowed in one of those zones. The day before that hearing, we received a letter from an applicant who's actually proceeding under a different provision, a compatible use provision. And the concern was that by deleting compatible use provisions from our light industrial, general industrial, and business park zones, we were actually reducing the availability of what people could do in those zones. And since that wasn't our intention, we asked the board, give us another couple weeks just to look at it and come back to you today. And so here we are at a continued hearing. Today's hearing is for deliberation and discussion only. And what Jennifer and I got together, along with Mike in the planning department, and we decided that because we really did just want to make sure that we were expanding and streamlining these zones, that we would leave the compatible use language as it exists in our light industrial, general industrial, and business park zones in for now. And then in the future, should we look at our industrial zones, we'll determine whether or not it needs to be there. So that was the conclusion we came up, and we think it addresses the concern that the applicant raised, and I think gets us to the right solution at this point.
Right, and since the issue of compatible and similar and that sort of language was raised before, perhaps you could talk a little bit about the difference between compatible and similar and why we need to leave it in, even though we're trying to streamline things.
Absolutely.
In terms of the change.
So similar use, you would look at the uses that are allowed in that zone and say the use I'm proposing is like something else that already exists there. A compatible use determination is a different analysis. You don't have to identify an existing use in the zone and say I'm like it. You say the use I'm proposing wouldn't have any additional impact, wouldn't impact the zone or the neighborhood itself. And my proposed use works with everything else that's already in the zone. So it's potentially more expansive opportunity for a potential applicant to go through than similar would be. And we didn't want to inadvertently delete that when what we're really trying to do is expand opportunities in these zones.
Right, it was streamlining, and we discovered that it was an unintended consequence to remove compatible. So any other questions of staff about this?
Well, I have, from the industrial side, from the private sector side, commercial developers and users, owner operators, how much involvement have they had in reviewing this language?
Individual property owners haven't had any involvement in this process, and what we're really doing is giving them additional opportunities. So in the industrial zones, they can already do compatible use determinations for primary uses, and they can do similar use determinations for conditional uses in 2 of the 3 zones, and the 3rd zone had a gap. That provision just wasn't there, which is really what raised this issue in the first place, is that we had a specific applicant in that one industrial zone that wanted to use that similar use determination process for a conditional use, and it wasn't available. And we realized, well, why is it in these 2 zones and not this other one? And so that was the reason to sort of go and look at what all the gaps might be in terms of that process. So individual property owner involvement didn't occur, which is actually fairly typical for legislative amendments unless you're adding restrictions. So if we were going to take away a use that somebody could do, we absolutely would notify individually. But in this case, it's an expansion.
I'm a little bit more comfortable with that explanation, but I would like, and I'm sure the board is open to amendments, but what's really important to me is trying to get people back to work, and, these people who occupy these zones and place businesses employ people, and I want to make sure that we are as accommodating as possible to help people get back to work, and I want to make sure that there's nothing in here that restricts, and you're basically guaranteeing me there's no restriction.
Correct. There's no new restrictions.
Yeah, and I guess I am, there's been some good testimony and comments that have come along in the last week along the lines of having specificity to outline what can be done in these particular uses, and I know we've crossed that path in many different zones and battling a number of those. Is there any part or any opportunity to list either examples of acceptable uses in not just this zone, but in other zones? Is there any reference to examples of uses allowed so that, or is there enough discretion to disallow something based on interpretation?
The way the zoning ordinance works, and this is just sort of a historic style that our zoning ordinance has, and it probably, I think, is shared by many other jurisdictions' zoning codes, is that we have lists of uses. We have over 40 zoning districts in Clackamas County that have evolved since 1960, so we have quite a few. And in virtually every case, there are laundry lists of what you can do. And of course, then what ends up happening is you leave things out because you just don't remember, or the market evolves, And so then this similar use determination sort of fills that gap in. And the similar use provision is discretionary. So, if you're listed, it's clear, you can do that use. If you're not listed, then you go through this process. So in terms of could we change that moving forward, there's probably two different ways that could be done. One would be to increase the size of the lists. You add more uses, which is certainly one, an approach we could take. Alternatively, you can become much more broad. So you can simply say, well, we allow all retail uses instead of trying to identify, the many different things you might sell. So either of those approaches would work. And I will say, this is really not related to this, but just it's related to your question. That one of the things kind of at the top of staff's list of where we might go to revamp the zoning ordinance would be to move to a table of uses, because we do have so many zones. It's very hard, even for staff, to steer people to the proper zoning districts for a particular use, because you have to look at so many of them, would be to move to a table, have this list, sort of check the box, is it allowed in that zone? And I suspect that what will be revealed by going through that exercise is a lot of inconsistencies that then we could go and address and decide, really should we be more expansive in certain zones, or should we move to a different style? But we sort of need to get our arms around what we already have.
Yeah. I understand the risk of discretion, but I also appreciate the benefit of discretion to say, be able to get to yes.
Exactly.
So in that, what I don't want to see happen, or I would like to see a mechanism, and it probably wouldn't be language we would include here, but a mechanism that if we do happen to get to no,
Right.
that there is not a very cumbersome, expensive, difficult process that bogs them down, that there's a fast-track process to have that reviewed, or maybe have that reviewed by the Board of Commissioners or a public review board or panel or something, so that they don't have to go straight to a hearings officer, hire an attorney, and get bogged down in more expense and delay.
There's
So
certainly
do we have a
procedural
mechanism
options.
that goes around the next step as a hearings officer?
Currently in the zoning ordinance, we do not. The planning director decision is appealable just to the land use hearings officer, with one exception. And that is exactly what we're talking about now, which is an interpretation. And in an well, I take that back. It goes to the hearings officer first. Then, if they don't like the hearings officer's decision for interpretations, they can go to you. All other decisions are final at the hearings officer level, and the board doesn't hear those. So in terms of how cumbersome that is, going to the hearings officer on an appeal only costs $250, and they get that back if they're successful. But certainly there's a time frame involved. Whether that time frame would be different than if we sent it to you as opposed to the hearings officer would be something we'd have to look at in terms of scheduling. Cost-wise, hiring an attorney certainly would be a cost, but the actual application fee is $250, refundable if they win the appeal.
Yeah. Well, we're in a competitive environment. Time is money. And if they have a better opportunity in another county or another region or another state, we've lost that opportunity because of that delay. So I would really like to hear from our legal staff as far as what they might think about a mechanism that would avoid that delay and that cost, so we can be competitive and we can respond quickly in a positive way.
I'd have two thoughts on that. One is there's still, if someone proposes a use and it's not listed as an allowed use, it's not listed in the code, and staff concludes that it's not a similar use either, or in those three zones, a compatible use, there is always the safety valve of just a legislative text change. So that is, I want to do X new business that no one's contemplated before, it's not currently allowed. Staff could review that, and we could do a legislative process like we've done on this. That does require going through Planning Commission first and some notice, and then coming before the board. But that safety valve exists. In terms of creating a new process whereby we would skip the hearings officer step, that would be a pretty significant, that would actually be a huge change in the way we review applications. So I don't know that ZDO 235 is necessarily the right vehicle for making a massive procedural change, but something that we could look at and discuss, because I'd certainly agree that staying nimble is crucial to attracting business to the county.
Okay. Commissioner Damon.
So I appreciate Commissioner Savas's concerns and his attempt to, try to figure out a way for us to be more clear and provide more certainty as early as possible. And so I'm looking at the letter that we received that prompted us to carry this item over from, who is it from?
Ms. Kellington?
Wendy Kellington, yeah. And on the at the back side of that, she has a definition of compatible and a definition of similar, just based on Webster's dictionary. And do we have these definitions in the ZDO, in the code, so that it's really clear how we're defining compatible and similar?
No, not currently. The terms, of course, exist now. We're not proposing to add those as new terms as part of ZDO
Right.
235. I can't say for sure about compatible because I didn't do a search, but similar, I searched just literally our definitions section, and similar popped many times just within that. So to define similar, we're going to affect a lot of things other than just similar use determinations. If you were going to go just with a dictionary definition, that might be fine. If you wanted to do something different than a dictionary definition, we would have to go and sort of figure out what else would you be then effectively defining, because similar exists in so many other circumstances. The reality is when you don't define a term, we rely on the dictionary anyway.
Okay.
And the courts
Well, there you
use,
go.
correct me, you told me yesterday, Webster's third.
There's third in Oregon, yes.
So that's where we're going to go, which may be exactly what Wendy has cited in her letter.
Well, and that's just a
Right.
good clarification. Thank you for that, because we've heard some testimony from Mr. Langdon and others about that, when the words similar or compatible are open to, or comparable rather, are open to the discretion of a
Right.
particular staffsperson interpretation of what the definition is, that doesn't allow for much certainty for the applicant to know exactly where they're going to land. And so that's what I was looking for, is how can we even provide even greater clarity about, how those two words would be interpreted
Right.
within the ZDO.
Yes, and we would refer to the dictionary in that circumstance. Normally definitions in the zoning ordinance are for more technical terms, or where you're really trying to narrow a definition beyond what you would find if you went to a dictionary. That tends to be the way, but, there isn't anything that would prevent us from adding a definition for similar. It's just a question of whether you're going to inadvertently go somewhere you didn't mean to go. We'd want to probably evaluate how that applies in other circumstances,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
if it wasn't going to be the dictionary.
Thanks.
Commissioner Leininger.
Well, maybe we've kind of moved through this. I was going to say that since what you're proposing is an expansion over the baseline, hopefully that's not a controversial notion, an expansion over the base. And while we do need to have more clarity, it seems like there's a limit to how far we can get in this conversation. I see a bunch of people waiting in the audience who are hoping to give us their input. So my own thought would be, I'm all for talking about this more in public meetings, but maybe we could do that.
Well,
We could vote on this,
Yes.
but we might not need to solve the problem of exactly what kind of table and what definitions right now, since what we're looking at is an expansion.
So, yeah, this is not a public hearing today, is my understanding. That it's a continuation for discussion from the previous public hearing, because we had questions raised that we needed answered.
Correct.
So with that, yes, now I have the wrong papers.
Not on there.
No. Yes,
Madam Chair,
yes.
I move we approve
Commissioner
ZDO 235 as recommended by the Planning Commission, but with the changes subsequently made and recommended by staff. Correct? Yep.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Leininger that we approve ZDO 235 as recommended by the Planning Commission with the changes subsequently made. Any further discussion on this item?
I'm going to vote for this, but I'm going to request or make a motion or in the future that we bring the other discussion we had about streamlining, identifying those uses and try to find a way to help people quicker, sooner, and avoid the instant to the hearings officer step. So,
Yeah, I think that's part of a larger process that we will be launching. Then, there's no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Passes 5-0, which is unanimous. And now, I'll get back to my other papers. That brings us to citizen communication,
Wow, we have a lot of cards.
and have a number of cards, and some of us will have to leave before noon, but we should have time to get through most of them, I think.
Two at a time.
The first one I have up is Patty Hogue.
All two at a time.
Oh, yeah, I'll take them two at a time. Patty Hoag and Jenny Tan. And I will just do my explanation I did before, that citizen communication is an opportunity to address the board on items that are not on the agenda, or on items that are on the agenda but not scheduled for public comment. This portion of the agenda is limited to items of county business for the board as a whole to consider and may not be of a personal nature. If you wish to speak, you should fill out a blue card, which everyone has done here, and give it to our clerk. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and comments should be respectful and courteous to all. In most cases, if you have an issue that you need a response on, it should also be submitted in writing along with the best way that we might get back to you. Commissioners may choose to respond under commissioner communication, or staff may get back to you after the meeting. So proceed, and who did I, yeah, get me confused. Go ahead. Our person, I called Patty first and then Jenny, so it does, but it doesn't matter. If you would like to switch, you're welcome.
Sure. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak here, Commissioners. My name is Jenny Tan, and I serve on the Westland City Council. I'm here to speak not on behalf of the council. My views here expressed do not represent the council's. I also am serving on Clackamas Women's Services as well as Providence Milwaukee Hospital Foundation, and I'm a citizen in Clackamas County. I am here to talk about my concerns for children's safety in our community. Thank you so much for advocating to put aside $1 million to services for domestic violence and child abuse in your meeting on March 20th. Prior to serving on the boards for Clackamas Women's Services, I never had any personal experience. I didn't know anyone who was a victim of domestic violence or child abuse. However, I have two young children that mean the world to me. And when I read and look at newspaper articles that talk about children that have suffered from abuse, my heart just breaks thinking about, what if that was my child? What if they suffered some kind of abuse and didn't have the services to recover and move forward? Child abuse and domestic violence is an important part of public safety, and that needs to be prioritized in the 2012 and 2013 budget. I realize that these are tough economic times. Revenues are decreasing, expenses are increasing, and there are a lot of tough choices to be made. But we need to make that choice to save people's lives. We as citizens have elected you as our officials to protect those that are most vulnerable, and we ask you to do so. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Patty Hoag. I am a longtime resident and a longtime successful business owner and a registered voter in Clackamas County. This is more of a testimonial so that you can understand the importance of this discussion. Living in domestic violence is unlike anything that you can ever imagine. It's like living in a constant state of shock with no cure. Domestic violence doesn't have any social boundaries, and I know this for fact because I am a survivor of very severe domestic violence. With bleeding head, with lumps and bumps all over my body, I had called the Lake Oswego Police Department on numerous times, a minimum of 3 times. On each time being told that they didn't get involved in domestic issues. And by each call I made and each police visit in denial of safety, my abuser, which was my husband, became stronger. And with each denial of safety, he became darker. He thought if the police didn't care, no one cared what happened to me. I'm a strong person, more from design than desire, for sure. I endured, I had calculated my plan of escape many years ago, but what I couldn't do was help my little boy. You see, he was still obligated to see and visit that abuser. My precious restraining order was only good for me. It did not protect him. So I had to hand over my son every other weekend to a very deeply disturbed, abusive father. It wasn't uncommon to receive a phone call to come retrieve my little boy on those visits because of his safety being in peril. I won't get into my son's side of these stories because really it belongs to him to tell someday if he indeed wants to. But how do you tell your little boy and make a promise he's going to be okay? Even though you know that both your lives are in immediate peril and danger. You have no place to turn and no one there to help you. And how do you tell your little boy that he has to go on a visitation with the abuser in your lives, where just weeks ago you got that frightening nightmare of a phone call that he was going to drive off a bridge with your son strapped in the backseat of the car? There was nowhere to turn. There was no one to help, no place to go. I couldn't talk to anybody. I felt no one did care. And back then, CWS was actually in its infancy. I wish that there was a CWS to turn to, because, you know, this was back in the early 90s, and there was no help, no place to go. I couldn't talk to anybody, and I felt no one cared. I wish I did have CWS. This was back in the early 90s where CWS was in its infancy. The only shelter was in Multnomah County, and they couldn't help me because I lived in Clackamas County. And I'm amazed at how many Clackamas County citizens I've talked to that think that CWS is actually funded, a program that's funded and paid through their taxes. That's our public that thinks that. I've also heard the same from my Lake Oswego Rotary brothers and sisters. So this makes me think, with so many people being misinformed, I can only imagine how hard it is for CWS to do fundraising and get the needed funds for the victims. There are victims that are referred.
You need to kind of wrap up just to
I'm
be fair
just
to our
I
other
have about
people.
2 sentences,
Okay.
if I may. Since CWS has relied so heavily on our public safety systems, why isn't our county heavily digging into its budget for CWS? That's my point. And it's just simple. Everybody deserves to go to sleep and wake up feeling safe.
Thank you.
That's everything.
Appreciate it. The next two are Antoinette Newland and April Quast, perhaps. Oh, April had to leave. Then how about Susan Bartz?
Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing us to come and speak. And it's Antoinette Newman, N-E-W-M-A-M. Sorry for the handwriting. I am also a board member for Clackamas Women's Services. I'm a taxpayer as well as a resident in Clackamas County. And I come to you not with a lot of personal experience outside of work experience with women and children of domestic violence and sexual abuse. Can you not hear me? Sorry about that. And I think of, it's funny, being on the board here as well as in California, I wasn't aware that until I got involved in the boards that this was not a tax-paying thing as well. I thought that's where the dollars came from. But I think of how it allowed me to be involved in this situation as an advocate and now as a psychologist. I think of the 50-year-old woman who walked in to my office and did not even understand where the resources would come from because her husband was very wealthy, very well known, and a societal man, and was afraid to find out where resources would come from that he wouldn't understand why she was spending the money to see a therapist. But the day that she woke up in the hospital and had a court-appointed advocate sitting there for her, she understood that there were other things that she could do. Or when I walked in as an advocate to Children's Hospital and there was a 14-year-old girl who had just been sexually abused by a gang and looked at me and said, "Why does anyone care? This has been happening to me since I was 5." And she had no idea that there were resources out there. Or the young man that I sat with and talked to that said, "This is not a man's issue. I've been abused by my lover. I've been abused by my father, but I was ashamed because I'm a man, I'm not a woman." No one had educated him that there's no color lines, there's no social lines, there's no economic lines. It's not a sexual issue. It's not a race issue. It's not a male or female issue. It's a human issue. I thank you again, and I reiterate what my colleague Jenny Tan said as far as what you have allocated to CWS on the 20th of, I believe, this year, March, or was it? Yeah, March. To allocate $1 million to go to CWS in the fight of sexual abuse and child abuse and the safety issues. The budget and funding to this issue, I employ and ask you to really take into consideration because it is one of my concern. Not because it affects me personally as far as in my family. I have 3 small children, 3, 5, and 7. And I can only hope when I go to bed at night that they're safe. And that's why I employ you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Susan Bartz, residential property manager and voter here in Clackamas County. And I value your decision to prioritize children's safety in the 2012-2013 Clackamas County budget. The one-time allocation that you've graciously bestowed upon those services of $500,000 this past year has been critical in delivering public resources by exceptional nonprofit service providers in our community. Antoinette just referenced CWS, but of course that there are many others as well with Children's Safety, our Children's Center, Northwest Housing Authorities, as well as many others who have come before you and spoken over the last several weeks. Private funding sources providing public safety services severely limits meeting the immediate need. While these are tough economic times for all, women and children under our watch are suffering, and in some cases killed, as we delay providing these services. The $1 million offered meets the baseline required to maintain the ongoing programs proportionate with this growing need. Not only do I value your commitment that you made a few weeks ago to providing these financial resources, but I also thank you for the time you've invested in this issue, especially the last 18 months as you've been dealing with public safety issues, specifically as relates to children's safety. This process has been a catalyst for even stronger relationships between children's safety and resource providers inside of Clackamas County. The extensive communication between community leaders around providing children's safety has limited the duplication of services or system inefficiencies so that we can maximize the number of children that are being served and receiving comprehensive services, even given the limited financial resources. Fostering the incredible cooperation between these agencies is something that you as county commissioners should be very proud of. The current issue is limited capacity, as the system relies on nonprofit providers for crisis intervention, safety net services, and support to investigate and prosecute the perpetrators. Thank you very much for your assistance in meeting this acute crisis for our unsafe children. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next card I have is cards, Karen Jellers and Heather Chrisman.
My name's Heather Chrisman. I'm speaking on the Anti-Light Rail Initiative. It has been placed on the Clackamas County ballot for a vote this September and is designed to make it difficult to have any transit in the future. The regional rail system is the foundation of the Regional Transportation Plan and is a fundamental investment in our region's future. Gradually, rail is being expanded to connect all the principal destinations in this region. Where does that leave people that live in some parts of Clackamas County? People need to live here and still be able to connect easily to jobs. Mass transit contributes to vibrant community centers. Without it, we have lower density, car-oriented development. We can expect to see more strip mall development with sprawl and the traffic growth that such development generates. In our country, we have a representative government, and Clackamas County Commissioners have been voted into office by a majority of the citizens of Clackamas County to make decisions. I don't believe in holding an election every time we need a decision. But that is, in fact, what we will do if this ballot measure passes. This ballot measure is so far out there, we can't spend a single dime on any rail project without an election. That means if we want to put in extra lighting on a station platform, we have to hold an election. It means if we want to trim the branches on the trolley trail from South Waterfront to Lake Oswego, Clackamas County will have to hold an election. It means we waste money and time. It's irresponsible, and I can't support it, and I would vote no in September. Thank you.
Thank you. And Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen Chellis, and I am a Clackamas County mom with 2 children in the North Clackamas School District. I'm a homeowner, a taxpayer, a registered voter. I serve on one of the recreational soccer board leagues. I'm a volunteer in the school. I support local businesses, and I am for keeping all transit options open as we grow and accommodate more people moving into Clackamas County. I believe this ballot measure that goes to the public in September is really designed to kill all transit, including the eventual Lake Oswego line. I think it is way too overbroad, and that if we want to spend any money, like on security or more lights, we need to have an election, which I think that's crazy. And we elected representatives to manage our resources. And if we had to vote, if everyone got to vote on every single item, nothing would get done in our county. I believe we should also be having only one election in November and not be spending any extra money with a special election. I believe we must use our resources wisely and not spend thousands of extra dollars for a special election, especially when the general election is less than 2 months away from that. I think we need to preserve our options for the future, not close them down. Voting yes on this measure ensures that Clackamas County is doomed to lots and lots of traffic congestion and fewer and fewer options for our children. I believe this measure makes it harder and harder to build any kind of transit. That is something our community should fight. We will grow. We will grow. Do you want to grow without transportation infrastructure and with more gridlock? No, we should want to keep all of our options open as we grow. We want smart development. I worry about the environment and keeping our air clean. I think that less vehicles on the road would be helpful. And finally, I believe in jobs, and we need as many green construction jobs as we can have. And I don't understand why people are opposed to work that builds our infrastructure. America has been built with the construction of infrastructure projects for years, which provide excellent living wage jobs for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one I have is William Ware and Brian Johnson. I don't know if it's my eyes or or someone's penmanship, but I'm having a hard time with these. Sorry.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. I'm assuming I'm going first here. My name is William Ware. I live at 14754 Southeast Y East Avenue in Damascus, Oregon. And the first thing I'd like to say is I'd really like you to consider having your council meetings for the citizens at night rather than during the morning. I know for myself it's rather difficult to get down here. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people in the same situation that would really appreciate the evening so that they could come down also. But my subject is the ethics violation that was filed by Mr. Woods, Mr. Bernard. Now, there was an article in the Oregonian several days ago where TriMet corrected a coding error, and I'd like to read that. It said, quote, "When we spoke to the engineer who maintains the list, she said it was a coding error." This is the director of the real estate department of TriMet. "It's a dynamic process. There are more than 200 files, and we made a mistake in this case," unquote. Now, I would think with light rail, such a hot subject and it seems to be a continuous subject, we have election going on, that this is gross incompetence on the part of that engineer. And it's really gross lack of supervision by the person that had that quote. And that type of thing, what it results in, as an example, is Mr. Bernard apparently was kept in the dark for quite a while because he's made a number of statements that he didn't know how this was going to affect his property. And Mr. Woods spent countless months and weeks asking questions and finally resorted to filing this ethics complaint and spent time and effort and money. So just to wrap it up here, what I would like is that given that you represent the taxpayers, would take a consensus of the commission and send to TriMet a demand that those two taxpayer-funded employees be removed and an outside forensic audit be done on that department. I think this is a serious matter given how that has been the focus of our county. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Johnson. My address is on file. I'm here for my brother Kevin, who couldn't be here today to read his letter. First, I would like to thank Mr. Madcore and his staff for the answers to my public information request. I really appreciate their effort. There is one question yet to be answered, possibly because it came up after looking at the information given. I have not submitted it in writing, but maybe you can help me today. Ms. Lehan, I know you had trouble a couple of weeks ago with the definition of flexibility, so I'm going to try to make it easier. In the library district's IGA with the cities on attachment C, it states the parties agree that all library services providers shall strive to meet the Oregon Library Association threshold standard. The question is, what is the definition of strive? Does 10% below the standard meet the definition? What about 25 to 30% below the standard? Does that meet the definition of strive? If the only reason the standard is not met is because the city chooses to use the money on financing, does that meet the definition? You, as the library district board of directors, need to make some decisions. Are the standards important or not? Should the standards be dismissed so you can close the Oak Grove Library? They were one of the reasons for having voters pass Measure 3-310, as stated in the flyers, bringing all libraries up to Oregon library standards. The citizens of Gladstone and Oak Grove are losing properly staffed libraries and opening an understaffed library so you can get out of the operating business. But the reality is, if Happy Valley is smart, you will never get out of the library operating business. Instead, through this scheme, you will burden the taxpayers of Gladstone with a huge debt, all without a vote, but that is the standard operating procedure around here. I think it's time you get control of the library district or resign from being on the board of directors. Now, Ms. Lehan, do you have a definition for the word strive as used in the IGA?
I'll turn to Mr. Madcore and say, would you
Strive,
like-
a concerted,
Definition of
good
strive.
faith effort to achieve.
So the question is are you going to allow the library in Gladstone, which you are paying millions of dollars to run undermanned so they can use the money to pay for it? That's a simple question.
I don't have enough information about that. at this point.
You're on the library board of directors. It's a very simple question. Are you going to allow the city of Gladstone to
Thank you
understaff
for your
its library?
Thank you for your testimony. The next
It was a
two
question.
cards-
It's a question.
We don't,
It's a very simple question. You don't have to have staff. You or 5 are on the library district board.
Mr. Johnson, I'm happy to chat with you afterwards, and your brother as well.
Well, are you on the library district board?
Not, but that way I can advise the board about your question.
It's a very simple question. I don't think you need a lawyer.
People I have up are Linnell Vandermolen and Jeannie Freeman.
I maybe ask the administrator to, and legal staff to tell me what the role of the library district is, the meetings, and so forth, so I can better get a grip of the question and the answer, the appropriate answer, and find out what the roles are to make sure there's some oversight with those tax dollars.
We'll provide you some information on that.
Thank you.
Be glad to.
Yes, hello, I'm Laniel Vandermolen. I live in Tualatin. Last time I came to the commission meeting, I asked if we were attached to ICLEI, which is the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. And you said that we were, and so I would like to request that we, as a county, detach ourselves from ICLEI, because it doesn't really represent the residents of Clackamas County. It, as a body, is an organ of the UN, which would like to impose kind of this globalist Agenda 21 on various municipalities all over the world, and they do it through so-called green legislation, which there's nothing wrong with green legislation as long as it's not bogus, but it's really just a thinly veiled way of controlling eventually all economic activities, forcing people out of their cars, and suppressing property ownership. And I don't think that represents the values of people in Clackamas County. And at the beginning of this meeting, we all pledged allegiance to the flag of the U.S., not the UN. And so to reflect your claim, Commissioner Bernard, that we are a kind of a not Portland-centric county, I would like the board to prove it by detaching from ICLEI. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Jean Freeman. I live in 22911 Land Circle, West Lynn. I was really pleased to see this morning that we had more than just a handful of people here at the board meeting. Because I've looked around in prior meetings and wondered where everybody was. And then the answer that I could tell to myself was that, well, yeah, they're all at work. Just like you that have been voted into the board, when you took your seat and your oath of office, you said that you would promote your best representation for all the needs of the constituents of Clackamas County. As of today, there are 215,230 registered voters in Clackamas County. Only a handful are able to get to these meetings at 10 a.m. in the morning. My question is, Chair Leon, very simple. When is the board going to permanently change the business meeting to 6 or 7 p.m. in the evening so that the working people of Clackamas County will have an opportunity to express their concerns? Do we have any?
It's appropriate at a time in citizen communication for you to tell us that you think that it would be, that we should have evening meetings, more evening meetings or something. But it's not a debatable issue at this time or a back and forth. So,
Well, are there any plans within the board to change that in the future so that other people can be
it is
part of this discussion?
It is something under discussion.
Do we have a time frame for that?
It's under discussion. That's all I can say at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to leave. The next two people up are Robert Shannon and Yvonne Lazarus. And with that, I have to leave because I have another appointment with the Oregon City group down at Oregon City Hall that is at noon, and I'll probably be late as it is, but Commissioner Bernard will.
Good morning, Commissioner. Robert Shannon, Damascus, Oregon.
Robert, you need to.
Just sit and speak into the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got to jump ahead there.
Please.
Well, third time I've been out here on this Vogel Road thing, but I talked to that Joseph Merrick, and he was going to check on that merging lane on 172nd. They either close it off or, where people merge, that left turn lane there. Well, anyway. And also, I was going to talk about, he didn't seem to think that he could change that speed limit from 40 to 30. He said it's state mandated. Is that so?
Well, I'd be happy to answer that. There is a process to change that. It is state mandated. I can tell you that in Milwaukee, we tried to change Lake Road. It took 5 years. So it is something we will continue to look at.
Okay. Well, one other thing excuse me, that 172nd, all the way over to Foster Road, about the last third of a mile is in Multnomah County. I don't know why they ever didn't have the border at Foster Road, And so that's, now they need a light there and need to widen the intersection too. So we're getting all this Gresham traffic from the town center, and it's increasing every day. So I wish you folks would look into that, see what we can, get something going, because it's not going to get any better. I guess let's see here. Well, yeah, another thing that bothers me is these people that ride bikes, There's no shoulder on the road, but here they are riding down there, and people have to go around them to, without hitting them and stuff. I know in Portland, they're going crazy with these bike lanes. In fact, there's a street in Portland, I don't know, you probably know where it is, Holgate Boulevard. From 92nd to 122nd, they took the two outside lanes and put them into bike lanes, and now we got 2 lanes of travel. How do you like that? And then they put in a left turn lane towards the end there, and that's, I don't know, that's Multnomah County for you. Of course, he's hoping to get a different mayor in there that he's on his way out, but, But anyway.
Well, thank you.
Have I got any time?
Oh, you've got some more time.
No, just about. I don't know, talking about development fees. Well, this guy had a pizza place there in Portland on Hawthorne Boulevard, and he wanted to move across the street, bigger building. And so the city of Portland, they said they're going to put an impact fee, traffic impact fee on him. God, it was $thousands of dollars. Now, I thought, what the heck's going on here? They didn't increase the traffic on Hawthorne Boulevard. It's, that's about it, I guess.
Thank you, Robert. I wish we
bet.
could do something about that, but
All right.
thank you. Yvonne?
Good morning. I'm Yvonne Lazarus, and I live at 2063 Southeast Torbank Road. I'm sorry the young ladies left that spoke about light rail. I went to a meeting at the Bybee Station this last week, and there has been 1.8 million shaved off, and they're all worried about safety issues there. And their comment to TriMet was, we only want what you promised us. It doesn't look to me like any of us are going to get what we were promised. Next, we have Tacoma Street, and I wonder what they're going to shave off there. I haven't been to any meetings over there, but I'm going to start going to meetings around. By the time they get to Park Avenue, I am frightened at what we're going to have. I am upset that Charlotte left, and I'm going to tell you why. She is the chair, and I want to know when the 25 million is going to be put on the agenda. 3 weeks, and we're going to be into May. I am hoping that you will think about having these meetings at night so no one has to leave. Will somebody please get back to me when they're going to put this on the agenda? I would hope to hear from Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you. Mac Woods and Mariana Moore.
Chair Bernard, I just have a question related, it just struck me, and I know it's important, and with regard to, you mentioned you're going to be going to the light rail committee meeting. What's the name of that group, that committee?
You know, I'd have to look up the specific name. It's been about 1.5 years since I've been there, and I don't know that date. But
Yeah, there's a number of concerns similar to what Yvonne has mentioned, and not just from her, but from a number of people, and there's been a concern from a long time that because there hasn't been any meetings in 1.5 years, no one there representing Clackamas County from the commission, that maybe things have been shaved off the project that might compromise safety, and there were assurances made by the Board of County Commissioners at the time that the project would remain whole, and that we wouldn't suffer any compromises in those assurances of certain particular features, safety, access, disability access for the disabled, ADA access and so forth would not be compromised. So it appears, though, that they are being compromised, and I look forward to a report on how that's going and making sure that, because if it does look like it's going to be compromised, I think that's going to be a huge concern for our Clackamas County residents.
Great. Thank you. I think, Mac, you were up first.
Thank you. I'm MacArthur Woods, living in Clackamas County. Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, and folks out there in the county that these young men and women represent, good afternoon now. With great respect, we pledged our allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, as we all stated at the beginning today. Our pledge means a lot to me and should to you as well. We have our Constitution that is all about this country, our freedom, and many other good things. This includes Clackamas County, right here in this nation, under God, this state, and this county that you represent. We all understand what respect means. Respect means more than simple words, sometimes to praise deserving people and never to intentionally confuse or deceive others. That includes integrity and respect. Sadly, what we think is simple words can confuse good people. We don't always know why, if it's true or false, or simply a reason to confuse and fool others. Whether intended or not, it may even be a simple fact that some may not understand. If any simple word is intended to deceive even one person, then it's wrong. Now, with great respect, I must say I'm feeling sorry for Mr. Bernard, and we certainly don't want to cause you to have a cardiac. Chair Lehan last week cut me off sharp, would not allow me to go over even seconds, not allowing me to cover simple facts for your benefit, Mr. Bernard, to answer your questions. In the city, properties have legal descriptions called lots and blocks. Now I'm referring to Block 37 we talked about, where Mr. Bernard clearly stated you own 5 lots, the majority of which is Block 37. You may be pleased to know you also own another tax lot on the same block for a total of 6, not 5. more specifically described as parcel 11E36BC01200, registered to Bernard's Garage Incorporated, which you are the president, Mr. Bernard. The big mystery to me is who owns the other two lots, 7 and 8, on block 37. The tax records indicates there is a memorandum of contract only filed, which states transfer the real property more particularly described in Exhibit A hereto is restricted by the contract to which reference is made by the terms and conditions.
Mac, you need
My
to finish
simple
up.
question, Mr. Bernard, do you have any connection to or with lots 7 and 8, or the Buckwalter Marianne trustee, or the Shipley Family Trust? Just a simple yes or no would be okay.
No.
If you have any questions, go ahead.
No.
No is the answer. You have no connection to those, the Shipley
I know the
Family
folks,
Trust in
but
connection
no.
to those. Thank you,
No.
that's all I need.
Thanks for asking.
Appreciate it. Does any of you other commissioners have any questions? Because this has been kind of confusing to Mr. Bernard,
you
and it's
need to
starting to
finish
bother
up.
me is to see him squirm and swiggle.
So Mac, I mean, Mac, the question I have for you, I mean,
Yes,
does
sir.
that answer your questions on this? I know you've been here several times.
Yes.
I mean, are you satisfied now with your
There needs to
questioning?
be some clarity, and simple clarity. He mentioned last week that it was 50 feet long on that lot he claims not to own. It's actually 150 feet long, Mr. Bernard. You said it's 2.5 or 3 inches. I reviewed the tape, wide. You're wrong.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You want to see
Thank
the
you for your
details? I put them in
clarification.
front of you.
Thank you for your clarification.
Okay, why couldn't you just be honest with us on
I
that?
am being honest with you, Mac. You are
Thank you. That's
done,
what
and
we
I'm
know.
not
We do
answering.
appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, give him a hand. He's being honest. Thank you. Was there any other questions from anybody? I'm okay with questions.
Nope, we're
I-
good.
And your father could explain that to you. He owns Joseph Bernard Real Estate Company, for goodness
Does
sake.
he? No.
It's a good thing to have.
Oh, you think he does, huh?
Well, I think so.
Well,
Yeah,
I
he's a
think
real,
you-
well, he's not a realtor, but he owns the company. I
Well, thank
checked it
you.
out.
Didn't know that. My dad would be happy to know that.
Well, I
Mary
got it
Ann.
right here. You want me to show it to you?
Mac, you're welcome to leave it with the administrator.
No,
Be
no,
happy to look
I
at.
want to show him.
My
If he
dad
can
will
make copies
appreciate
fine.
that.
It's one copy I got. I went down to the, huh? I'll give it to you later.
You are done. Thank you. Mariana?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and the county people out there that vote. Hi, Steve.
Yeah, I'm Mariana Moore. I'm from Gladstone. I've been here many times. Anyway, I started out, I was going to say good morning. It's good to see you all here, but Charlotte's gone. This seems to be a common thing. I look at your job, which I think is pretty well paid, and your only venue where you're going to get together and see the people is basically 2 hours on Thursday morning. And I would think you would not be scheduling something else so that you have to leave in this specific time that's scheduled for us to be here and have our concerns acknowledged. And the fact that you won't answer any, and she leaves, oh yes, it's on the agenda. How many months has it been on the agenda to have some evening meetings? Paul suggested it. He comes on Wednesday evening, and usually he's the only one there. I have seen Jamie come, but for the most part, the rest of the commission just ignores that the people would like to see them when they have time off from work. And I think this is a disgrace that you won't all come and all be here at least on Thursday morning. This is ridiculous that you plan other things in this short time that's allotted to the public. And you were all, not all of you, but the majority of the commission made it to Washington, D.C. We saw the agenda that was to be there. We've had no report of what you did, what was accomplished. You don't tell us anything. You say, oh, well, write it out and we'll send you an answer. And we wait 2 or 3 months and we ask again and there's still no answer. And I'm here again, other people are here again. We'd like to see some evening meetings. I noticed Mr. Johnson in particular, his brother couldn't come because they're working men. And obviously Brian came off his job. We can't dress up and come in because people are working. And you save for your jobs, and yet you do everything you can to prevent the people that are working to have a part in what's done here at this meeting. Let's see. Well, I guess I could just wait and you could answer me if there is some schedule, anything, that they're going to have meetings in the evening. She said that it's being planned. I'd like to wait for an answer.
Well, thank you for your testimony. We are considering some future dates for evening meetings. We don't have a specific one right
Well, in
now.
3 months, you ought to be considering something.
We are.
What?
I'm telling you, we are considering specific dates. If, do
I'd
you
like
have
to know
anything
some
else
of
to
those
add?
dates you're considering.
Do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm waiting for a proper answer
Well,
to this
thank you.
question.
Then I'm going to proceed and call up the next people.
Well, I still have 12 seconds.
All right. Richard Langdon and Les Poole are next.
Mr. Chair, I just want to, just to make it this a little bit easier, you know, I just don't want to repeat for everyone that on the first Wednesday of every month that we've created an opportunity for people to come, and there's been at least one commissioner there at every Wednesday night, first Wednesday of the month. And last night was the first Wednesday of the month, and we had about 8 people, unique people that haven't been there before, to come to our meeting and testify or talk about whatever they want to talk about. So that opportunity, there's one night that has been committed to, and that's the first Wednesday, and the next one will be May 2nd.
And I appreciate it that you're doing that. I just wish the other commissioners had the same dedication. Thank you.
And can I just add one thing? And Mariana, one thing I did want to add is that we did talk about at our study session last week, I believe, about specifically the costs involved in having evening meetings and setting up a schedule of dates. And I'm specifically interested in having meetings actually out in the communities as well. And so this is some direction that we've given to staff to come up with, what are the costs and the plans and how we can do that. And then we're going to talk about it again at a study session. So I just want to let you know that we are, it isn't just that we're thinking about it, we're actually trying to put some dollars and a schedule to it.
Well, I'm not saying you have to have additional meetings.
No. Yep. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It involves having if we had meetings out in the community, it would involve having it being documented and broadcast, so. Yep. In the evening, yeah. Yep.
Les and Richard? Thank you for coming.
Where do I start? Les Poole, Oak Grove. This entire meeting has a common theme, doesn't it? And that theme is that money's tight and priorities need to be changed. It was true in the discussion of funding for the Housing Authority. It's certainly true for the issues with traffic safety that Mr. Shannon has brought up. And I believe it's obviously true throughout everything that has been discussed. And the reason that we're having problems is that some of the board members that were here before Jamie and Paul, and certainly under the flawed leadership of former Chair Lynn Peterson, priorities went askew. And we got all excited about sustainability, and it became a theme with no economic input on it. I'd like to thank Commissioner Savas for bringing the economic factor into the discussions of planning, be it ZDO 235, be it sustainability, be it green infrastructure. The ladies that spoke earlier, bless their hearts, they're so uninformed about the light rail vote. The citizens want to vote on major issues. And it's nonsense, it's absolute nonsense that we want to vote on everything and micromanage everything. That's an absurd statement, and I'm sure that someone presented that to her and she didn't think critically about it. And I'm not here to attack anyone. I'm here to talk about reality. People are coming to you asking questions and expecting answers. And the reason they're doing that is that so many things are not on the agenda. Surveys are done, but the biggest question wasn't on it. That question was, do you favor a public vote on funding $25 million for Milwaukee Light Rail, given that the IGA is shaky, given that the project has been, I use the word butchered? Yvonne just recently here commented about that, about things being slashed. And that's how we got to this fiasco south of Milwaukee that the county's being asked to pay for. It's not about infrastructure. It's not about future options. It's about misplaced priorities and commitments that are flawed. My question is when, and I mean, give me an answer, when is that $25 million going to be on the agenda?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, thank you for coming. Go ahead and start the clock, please.
No, I haven't started speaking yet. Do not start the clock. You know what? I'm sitting here in silence for my 3 minutes. That's garbage. We're going to do this again next week. That is absolute garbage. You do not start the clock on me early.
You're not going to
That's
testify?
that is outrageous behavior, Jim Bernard. That is childish bully behavior. You started the clock on me early because of some problem you're having. Excuse me, that's rude and certainly out of order.
Right, thank you. So you're done testifying?
No.
Right.
My
So we'll
silence
move
for
on
my
with
my
that.
silence for my 3 minutes is my testimony. Do not interfere with my freedom of speech, Jim Bernard.
I'm not interfering with your freedom of speech, so let's go ahead and move on to the consent agenda.
Please forgive me, you're interfering with my testimony of my 3 minutes, Jim Bernard.
You have an issue with that, take appropriate action. Camera's on.
I have the consent agenda up.
We're ready to read the
Please
consent
read
agenda.
the consent
agenda.
Excuse me,
Under
I'm
Health,
sorry.
Housing, and
This
Human
is my
Service-
3 minutes, this is my testimony.
Please leave
Jim
unless you
Bernard,
want to
please, you're
complete
out
the
of order.
discussion.
You're out of order. You started the clock on me early.
Please remove him.
I find this very troubling, and I would like to be removed also.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. What was that? Oh, yes. Jim Bernard? I just want to make certain that we know how much time
Thank
I
you.
have
Please
left.
go ahead and proceed with
I
the
have
consent
two
agenda.
minutes left.
The consent agenda, under Health, Housing, and Human Services, we have approval of a contract with Tri-County Metropolitan
We'll all be
Transportation
back.
District of Oregon for operating expenses of the Mountain Express bus service in the Hoodland area. Approval of an acute inpatient psychiatric service agreement with Providence Health for services of acute inpatient psychiatric service and acute outpatient mental health services. Under the Department of Employee Services, renewal of a service agreement with Kaiser Foundation Health Plan of Northwest
He's
for the
forcing you to do
2012
this.
plan year. Oh, no, no. Should we adjourn?
Pardon?
Guys.
Excuse me for being out of order, but I believe that his time was not allotted, and I believe that things need to change real soon around here. Thank you.
Also, approval of an employer group contract with Providence Medicare Health Plan effective January 1st, 2012. Under elected officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes. Approval to enter into an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County Sheriff's Office and the State of Oregon, Oregon Department of Transportation to participate in the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. Under our county council, approval of a restrictive covenant required to comply with land use approval conditions for Clackamas County Jail Renovation Project Phase B. And under the Water Environment Services Office, approval of an engineering services agreement amendment for the Clackamas County Service District Number 1 Intertie number 2 project, final design, and that concludes the consent agenda.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Hearing none, I can't really hear over there. Motion's carried unanimously. Next item on the agenda is commission communication. Who would like to start?
Oh, sure, point at me to start. Well, I mean, our meeting has gone longer than I anticipated and ended in a way that I didn't anticipate. It's really unfortunate that we can't have civil disagreement. I mean, the business meetings are an opportunity for the public to come and share with us their concerns. It's an opportunity for us to listen. It's an opportunity for us to direct staff to follow up on those concerns and questions. We don't know what people are going to bring up when they come and speak before us, and so we can't notice it for people to be here to participate in those conversations, which is why we don't go back and forth and debate. The 3-minute time is designed for people to speak to us, to come and share with us, and increasingly, as you've seen, we have folks that come and want to use the time in different ways, and it does feel like it's less of a people bringing us their concerns and more of a disrespectful interchange. It's unfortunate that Mr. Langdon was escorted out. I would wish that Mr. Langdon would have used his 3 minutes to share with us his concerns so we could follow up on what his issues were. One of the concerns that he brought up at our last business meeting had to do with definitions, and we did try to address that as a part of the ZDO agenda item and the agenda item today. Mr. Poole and others continue to ask us why we don't have the $25 million on our agenda. And I talked with Yvonne about this last week, and I shared with her that we don't have the outcome of the full funding grant agreement at the federal level yet. We don't know exactly what the dollars look like at the federal level. And clearly the project itself is dynamic and changing. And so there isn't a reason to put it on the agenda until we actually know what the dollars are and what the project's looking like and what we need to discuss. And so that's why it hasn't been on the agenda. I feel like I'm just rambling a little bit, and I certainly don't want to appear defensive. It's more disconcerting, and it makes me more sad that we just can't have a dialogue about these challenging issues in the county. And I apologize for not being at the Commissioner Forum last night. I was in a meeting in Lake Oswego where there were 80 folks there, and I felt an obligation to stay and hear from those folks their concerns, and so I missed the Commissioner Forum. I've attended all but 2, and I really am supportive with Commissioner Savas and other commissioners to try to have our meetings in the evening. We're making a good faith attempt to figure out what the costs are and how to do that and put together a schedule. And so, there are a number of other issues that have been brought up at previous meetings, and I could go on, and I'll look back in my notes because you see me taking diligent notes. I respect everybody that comes before us. And I encourage you to continue to do that. And I only ask that you come and speak to us in a respectful manner as well.
Commissioner Savas?
Well, I would appreciate the citizens that showed up last night at our community roundtable. And it was about 8 people, haven't been to a meeting before, at the roundtable before, and all brought different issues, so I appreciate that. Again, that was on the first Wednesday, and the next one was May 2nd, Mary, that was it? So on May 2nd, the first Wednesday of every month, we'll hold a community roundtable at night, and at least one commissioner will be there. My comment, I think it's important that when people come to testify or come to speak to us, that there's civility and there's respect. And I don't think that anyone ought to be targeted, whether they're here in the audience or whether they're up here or they're not here. I don't think people ought to be, attacked. I mean, you can refer to us, and I think that's commonly done. I think that's appropriate. And most of the time, I think it's appropriate. And I guess whoever is running the meeting or whatever the policies are, whether someone wants to be quiet or someone wants to speak, I guess that's an issue that, whether that's the discretion of the chair or whether that's the decision of the board on how that's allowed. We can either test those waters like we did here today, or we can allow the person to have their 3 minutes and exercise it whichever way they wish. But I'm not here to opine on that right now, but I think that we have options, and it's unfortunate that what occurred here earlier today. I know that a number of people have been kind of interested and concerned about, our code enforcement issues, and I've been working with a number of people in Clackamas County. And, just yesterday, I spoke to 2 businesses that are in the county that are impacted, and they may have indeed have some compliance issues, but I really think that we need to take a different tack and a different approach, and I have shared this. I think there is some effort to rewrite or change the language on how we communicate with businesses in Clackamas County, so that people know and businesses know that they're actually welcome here. We want people to be employed in this county. It's unfortunate that somehow when we do communicate with folks that a letter is kind of dry at times, but there's just 2 bullets here I want to read. I'm just compelled to read here, and basically it goes like this. And this is a letter to an employer of 30 people in Clackamas County. In order to avoid further enforcement action, please complete the following actions by no later than June 28th, 2012. Bullet number 1: cease or relocate all business activity which is not in compliance with Section 401 of the Clackamas County Zoning and Development Ordinance as outlined by Planning Director Mike McAllister and/or Planner Gary Hewitt. And bullet number 2, renew and obtain all final inspection on the above noted permits and address any additional permit or inspection requirements as noted by the inspectors. Well, you can imagine if you get a letter like that, you got 30 employees and you have to cease or relocate within, by June 28, 2012, and you would get rather upset. And so if anyone has seen any or heard of any issues with, heavy-handedness or whatnot, and I don't mean that there's any, I'm bringing this forth because we need to take a different approach. I mean, I think the effort we have to work with people, and this communication does not demonstrate that we're trying to help people through there. I think we could have had a different approach to how we do that and how we communicate when people are out of compliance or allegedly out of compliance on certain matters. But I would hope that our departments, economic development, which is designed to help businesses exist in Clackamas County or come to Clackamas County or expand or whatnot, that we have one department trying to help, and we have another department that seems to be prompted by an anonymous complaint, whether that's a personal attack by someone, or it's a confidential complaint. But we have a mechanism where one complainer can create this much hardship for a business and 30 employees, or a coffee stand with 8 employees. That we need to reform this. We need to reform this code, and I'm going to push as hard as I can for a better system in which these kinds of things don't happen, and that people are brought into compliance. It's not okay to be out of compliance in Clackamas County, but we need to have a better way of approaching it, and I'm going to fight for that.
Commissioner?
Well, I want to say thank you to some particular people, to everyone who testified today, but I'm particularly appreciative of about 4 women who came earlier today and had the courage to talk about how, at a time of scarce resources, we need to stand up to protect vulnerable kids, vulnerable grown-ups from abuse and violence. And it is scary sometimes for people to come into this room and testify. And I know that we have a number of people with very legitimate views that aren't the same as my view in some cases, who come every week and may be very comfortable in this room, but there are a lot of people who don't come very often and for whom it's a big deal to come in and share their views and share a testimonial about how they're a survivor of personal violence and had to escape from that to protect their child. That takes a lot of courage. And I think it's a good role model for us as a community, because right now we need courage. We need courage both to question government and rules and policies we disagree with, and we need the courage to approach one another with good faith and civility and an effort to get to a solution. And I have a lot of respect for, I'm looking at Les Poole. I think we agree on some things. There are things on which we don't agree. But I have a lot of respect for your intelligence and your commitment to making good public policy, and to a lot of other people in this room who come a lot, with whom I may not agree. And I would like to suggest that we work hard to try something different, and that is we need to find a way forward as Clackamas County. And this board is working hard to pursue the goals and policies to which we feel like we've made a commitment, that we feel like are good for the community, and that we feel like will lead us to a strong, prosperous future. And some people think there are different policies would be better. And I honor and respect that, but we need to find a way to talk about it that acknowledges that we're all part of one community. And so we're practicing. But I promise you that I'm going to bring good faith and an effort to hear and listen and communicate every time we get together. And that doesn't mean that we'll agree every time. And you won't agree with me every time, but I'm hoping that as we try to find a path forward for Clackamas County, where companies want to be here and grow here and stay here, where we have transportation systems that work so people can get to their jobs, so that we don't spend all our time waiting in traffic, so that freight can move, where we have rural areas where there are family farms that work well, where there are people in small communities whose communities are only possible, really, because in an area that's growing in population, there are some people who are choosing to live at greater densities, that we recognize that we all bring something valuable to this conversation. And even on the days when I don't agree with some of you or you desperately don't agree with me, we all bring something of value. We all deserve to be treated with integrity and respect, and we're all part of the same community. So that's my commitment to you. We are going to move forward into a stronger and more prosperous time. We're going to find our way through this light rail situation, and we're going to continue to make Clackamas County a great place to live. And this was a tough day, but some days are like that. And tomorrow will be another day, and we'll be stronger, and we'll try it again. Thanks.
Great, thank you. First, I'd like to make an announcement that the Sunnyside Library grand opening is April 19th at 2 p.m. 13793 Southeast Sebin Parkway. This is a project in cooperation with Happy Valley. Reuse of an old building is very successful. I had an opportunity to speak to somebody the other day, and they were really impressed and proud of how that library turned out. You can look at our website, www.clackamas.us, for further information and about all the different events that are happening around town. I have a couple comments. First thing, it's interesting that I didn't even know about the TriMet error until I read it on the web when Yuxing posted it. Somebody called me and said, well, that's a great article, and I had to go to the web to find that out. I think that's pretty amazing, but and I appreciate that our Yuxing actually does work hard to really find out the facts. And also my dad would appreciate that he owns a real estate company. He'll be happy to know that. Hopefully he'll get a check soon. This was a challenging day and a day of courage, frankly. We need to stand up against bullies that continue to bully this group on any issue. It is a sad day. I'm very, very emotionally challenged right now by the fact that that this gentleman actually invoked our sheriff's officer in the back to take him out with his arm behind his back. That's sad. That's very sad. But we got to stand up against bullies. I mean, it happens in school. Kids kill themselves. Disasters happen in the community because bullies continue to bully us. When all we're doing is doing what the folks who elected us to do, stand here and listen. And I'm certainly willing to hear criticism, but I won't be bullied, and we shouldn't allow that. I'm sure that this will be on YouTube tonight, and you know, that's too bad. And maybe it's time to stand up against bullies, and today may have been the day. I'm sorry it had to happen here. I'm sorry it had to happen to the citizens of Clackamas County. And I'm sorry it had to happen to these great people sitting up here who do nothing more than care about the community and moving us forward. This may be a step back, but if this is a step back that gets us past this, then it's a step we need to take. So appreciate it, and yes, and thank you very much. We also are going to go to the administrator because last week we wanted to adjourn the meeting in celebration of some employees at the county. So, Mr. Wheeler?
Well, yes, thank you. It's a sad celebration. It's actually, we want to adjourn the memory of 2 county employees who passed away in the month of March. So I'd like to read just a short excerpt about both of them, kind of a sobering reminder of how difficult things are sometimes. First of all, Marianne Barrington Geitzen. Marianne was an employee in Health, Housing, and Human Services who passed away on March 14th. She worked in H3S Office of Business Services Fiscal Section since 2001. Marianne loved doing things with her family and visiting the family ranch once a year in Wyoming. Her friends and colleagues here at the county will remember her for her excellent work and dedication. She was a great friend and co-worker. And also Jim Pinkert. Jim was an employee at Water Environment Services who passed away on March 4th. Jim worked for Clackamas County for 27 years and was a maintenance supervisor at West. Jim loved spending time with his family, camping, barbecues, riding his motorcycle, and watching the Seattle Seahawks. He also loved going to the Cotton Festival and spending time with his family in Texas. Jim was in the 1st Cavalry Tank Division and served from 1974 to 1977. He was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, had a medal as a sharpshooter, and was honorably discharged. Jim was proud of his service in the military. He was a good friend with a great sense of humor. So with that, we would like to adjourn this meeting in the memory and honor of Marianne and Jim. Thank you.
Great, and thank you. And anything else for the good of the order? With that, we'll adjourn. Thank you.